Hello everyone, Charles Watts here from Goal, Arsenal correspondent. Hope you're all well. I hope you're enjoying yourselves as best you can. Been a while, it's been about a week I think since my last video, so I thought I'd pop back on here and just talk about what's going on. A few little bits and pieces to keep you updated with. I'm sure you've probably seen some of the things I'm going to discuss, but I thought it would be a good time to come on and just have a little bit of a ramble and hopefully fill up a little bit of your day with a little bit of Arsenal news and discussion. Like I said, as I always say on these videos, thank you very much for taking your time to watch them. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't, please do hit the button somewhere down below you that says subscribe. Appreciate it, all your support with these videos, and I'll keep them going. And like I say, most of them hopefully fairly soon. You won't just be seeing them with a backdrop of this very boring white wall in my bedroom, because hopefully soon we'll be out there at some point, and I'll be getting in and around Arsenal once again, the training ground, the stadiums, whichever stadiums they may be, because it doesn't look like it's going to be the Emirates. It's going to be some neutral ground somewhere behind closed doors that hopefully soon some journalists will be allowed in, and we'll be able to bring you some coverage from the matches if and when they start up again. I'll start off with that, just in terms of where we are, in terms of football coming back and Arsenal coming back. I think we're certainly going to know more by this time next week. Arsenal players continuing to train on their own at London Colney at the moment. And when I say train, it's more a case of running, just keeping themselves ticking over, keeping themselves fit. But there's a chance that Arsenal will soon progress to small group training, with sort of social distancing rules still in place, but certainly working within groups, smaller groups of each other. The big key thing is what's going to happen on Sunday. Boris Johnson's going to address the nation on Sunday, talking about the next phase and how he might be, the government will be easing lockdown restrictions, and that's going to be key for football clubs when it comes to getting players back, getting squads back, and starting training up again. Very different type of training to what we've been used to, but certainly training nonetheless. Arsenal have been preparing for this, obviously, as all football clubs have. They've been working out what they're going to do when they are allowed to start training again in smaller groups. We're still a fair way off seeing big, the whole squad training together with contacts and things like that. That's just not going to happen just yet. But if Boris Johnson gives the go-ahead, and Premier League obviously are in discussions with the government, and Arsenal and all Premier League clubs are waiting for the government green light to do this. If, as expected on Sunday, Boris Johnson brings in the first round of easing the restrictions on the lockdown, then football clubs may be able to move forward and start training in smaller groups again. And that's what Arsenal are working to at the moment, potentially as early as next week. But yeah, you never know. It's what all football clubs are doing. We've seen in Italy now, they're getting back to training again. In Germany, they're getting back to training again. And England, a little bit behind in terms of those countries. But all Premier League clubs are putting plans in place into how they can move forward now. And like I said, I think we'll find out an awful lot more next week once Boris Johnson's made his statement, and then the clubs can start putting into action the plans that they've already got in place and they've drawn up about what they can do at London Colney and the various training grounds. It won't be full contact yet. When it does move to small groups, it will just be groups of sort of 4 or 5 working together, still sort of socially distancing as obviously best you can in that situation, no contact, things like that, and there'll still be really firm restrictions put in place at Arsenal that everyone has to adhere to. But I think by this time next week we'll certainly know a little bit more in terms of what's going to happen and the next phase in returning to training and getting football back, because it's clear, however you feel about it, and I've expressed my opinions on it, certainly on my Twitter account, I'm still a bit uneasy about the whole thing about footballers returning when we're still being told it's not really safe to do so. I don't think they're not sort of puppets on a string that we can just pull out for entertainment. Obviously, we know that they do entertain us, and that's what football's about. But the whole thing about boosting the morale of the nation, I think that's just feels a little bit off to me, because I'm not sure you'll be boosting the morale of footballers who don't want to play or are uneasy to play, and certainly their family members and people around them who are going to be exposed to extra risk if football starts up again. But look, I've had a fair bit of grief on that on Twitter anyway for expressing that view, so I'm not going to bore you on it right now. But it certainly does feel like we are getting closer, perhaps, to something beginning to start up again. As I said, the government seems to be behind it. The Premier League clubs desperately want it because of money, plain and simple. And so I think we're getting towards Premier League or football, certainly knowing more of a firm date or timescale when football could return. So that's the news in terms of Arsenal and coronavirus and lockdown restrictions and all of that. I've just seen literally flash up there on my computer, which I've got down here, that the Bundesliga will return in the second half of May. So I mean that's only a couple of weeks away, really, 3 weeks away. And the German Football Association will meet tomorrow to discuss a restart date. So we're getting closer to it in Bundesliga. Premier League, like I said, is a couple of weeks behind. But I think that there's going to be an awful lot of eyes being fixed on Germany and how that works. An awful lot of clubs in England will be looking at that, and the FA and the Premier League and everything like that. In terms of other things from Arsenal, I thought I'd discuss Henrik Mkhitaryan. Obviously, you remember him. He's still an Arsenal player, obviously out on loan in with Roma. He's had a decent season over there. His stats have been good. He's got good numbers. I mean, he's had a couple of injuries which have limited his appearances, but he's scored goals. He's set up goals and had a good season. And Roma like him, and he likes it over there. And judging by this statement he's just come out with, he doesn't want to come back. So Mkhitaryan's delivered a message to Arsenal, and this is come from the Corriere dello Sport, the Italian newspaper. My time in London is over. I hope you managed to find an agreement with Rome because my desire is to stay. I mean, pretty blunt to the point from Mkhitaryan. I don't think he's going to have too many people at Arsenal complaining that he wants to stay in Rome. And Arsenal will be more than happy to get him off the wage bill. He's the second highest earner at Arsenal behind Mesut Ozil, and he's still got a year left on his contract. He's clearly not too much in Arteta's plans. He wasn't in Unai Emery's plans. I asked Mikel Arteta about him one of the last press conferences before lockdown started, and he said he's been doing well in Italy. He's been watching him, and if he does come back, then he's a player he could look to use next season. But I think everyone knows if there's a deal to be done with Roma, then Arsenal will try and do it. The transfer fee's not going to be big. We know that. I mean, he's 31 now. He's got a year left in his contract after this summer. And he's a huge earner that Arsenal would love to get off their wage bill. So I think you're looking transfer fee-wise, potentially something like 10 million. But you've got to look at the savings as well in the year of not having to shell out 200 grand a week for a player that you're not really going to use for another season. So, you're going to save an extra, I can't do the maths off the top of my head, but it's a lot of money, £15 million, something like that you're going to be saving on top of the transfer fee. So I think Arsenal, if there's a deal to be done with Roma, and it's certainly the wood noises coming out of Roma, is that they want to keep Mkhitaryan, then Arsenal will look to get that deal done for around £10 million. And that is going to be a decent enough deal for Arsenal. I'm not expecting a sort of like-for-like replacement from Mkhitaryan. I think Arsenal got other priorities in the transfer market when it does open. And, as I've said before, money's going to be limited. Business is going to be limited. They're going to have to work out some really sort of clever deals, loan deals, swap deals, little bit of money floating around, but not much at all. So I'm not sure they'll go for a like-for-like sort of replacement for Mkhitaryan. I think they'll look at Saka. Joe Willock, again, is going to be a year older. They've got Saka who can play on the left, his favourite position on the left wing, and that's where you kind of look at Mkhitaryan. You've obviously still got Mesut Ozil at number 10. You can play the number 10 role. I'm not expecting Ozil to leave this summer, so you've got another year at least of Ozil. Emil Smith-Rowe to come back. So you've got options there with the youngsters and Ozil. So I just don't think they're going to go and replace like for Mkhitaryan. I think it'll be a case of getting him out, getting the money off the wage bill, and then focusing cash elsewhere. But it's a good deal for everyone, I think, and I do expect it will happen one way or the other this summer. That Mkhitaryan will get his move permanently to Rome. Like I said, not for a lot of money, but I think it will happen. And everyone certainly looking by that comment from Mkhitaryan, he'll be happy, Roma will be happy, and Arsenal will be happy. So ticks the boxes for everyone. If you haven't seen it yet, I've advised catching Ian Wright's interview with Mikel Arteta. Went out on Adidas's channels yesterday. He spoke to Mikel Arteta at home via a Zoom call. It was a really good interview. It lasted about 10 minutes. Arteta saying some interesting things, which I'll just go over, which I thought were good. As always, it's great to listen to Mikel. He's such a good talker. Just seems to get it. And considering what the last manager was like, and it was very difficult to really put his point across concisely. I think Arteta is the complete opposite. When you listen to him, you feel enthused, and I certainly came across feeling enthused at the end of that, listening to Ian Wright's discussion with him yesterday. One of the key things he was talking about was new signings and how everyone wants to sign for Arsenal. If they don't, then it's not really a player that he'll be too interested in. It'll sort of turn him off him a little bit. He says, the moment we mention Arsenal, you know what it means around the world. Everybody wants to come here and we have a really clear idea of what we are. It doesn't need much convincing, and if they do, for me, it's not a good starting point. If I have to convince a player to stay or to join us to Arsenal, it holds me back a little bit. Interesting comments from Arteta there. Still, obviously, saying that Arsenal are a very, very big draw, despite what's gone on in the last few years, despite the fact they're not in the Champions League. Still, the word Arsenal, the club Arsenal, is attractive enough proposition to excite pretty much any player in world football. I thought the bit about if I have to convince a player to stay holds me back a little bit, and that's obviously there's a couple of players, contract negotiations ongoing, Bukayo Saka, and perhaps more importantly, certainly for the immediate short term, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who only has a year left on his deal, and lots of talk about what's going to happen with him this summer. As I've said in my last video, I think the whole coronavirus pandemic and the pushback we've seen with when the transfer window will be, certainly the limits that people are going to have in terms of transfer budgets and in terms of offering wages, I think it's a lot more likely that we'll see Aubameyang stay at Arsenal now, certainly for the next season, than maybe it was looking a couple of months ago. I just don't see I can't see anyone offering Arsenal big enough money to really tempt them to losing someone who can get them 30 goals next season. And I'm not sure people will really be too willing to offer Aubameyang the type of wages that maybe he would have been expecting a couple of months ago. So it might be better for him if he doesn't want to sign. I'm not saying he doesn't want to sign, he might. But if he doesn't, it might be better for him to stay another year and then leave on a free transfer where it'll be more attractive to other clubs. So I think it's certainly looking more likely that Aubameyang's going to stay. But in terms of signing a new deal, I'm far from convinced. But we'll have to wait and see about that, because this might have changed his opinion of things as well. He might suddenly think that Arsenal's a much more attractive proposition, and what Arsenal are offering him to keep him is a more attractive proposition than what he might get now a year down the line. So that's certainly I think the coronavirus pandemic and the shutdown, the lockdown, the financial implications it's had, is making it more likely that Aubameyang might stay. But it's interesting there that what Arteta is saying if he has to really convince a player to stay, then it holds him back a little bit. Because when you think back to what Arteta said about Aubameyang, certainly doesn't give off the impression that he's holding back. He's adamant he wants him to sign at all costs, he said a couple of months ago in one of his press conferences. So that might give a little hint in terms of how he believes talks between himself and Aubameyang and the club might be going. Because Arteta is spending an awful lot of time talking to his players, so he's having a lot of one-to-one time, hour-long conversations, not just about their future, not just about football, about everything, their family. He wants to get to know them. He talks about this in his interview with Ian Wright, how he's using this time to really get to know his players, because since he arrived in December, it's been so sort of bang, 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 game after game after game. He's had no real time to build up, not a rapport, because he certainly, you can tell by the players' reactions, but a real sort of emotional rapport almost with his players. And this has given him the opportunity to do that, because he's talking to them daily or every other day for a long period of time about everything, just to get to know them better. So I thought that was interesting, and certainly in terms of players who he doesn't want to have to convince to sign them, that he might work against it. And there's certainly players that Arsenal want to sign this summer. Whether they can do it because of the whole financial side of things, we'll have to wait and see until the window opens, whenever that may be. I thought those were pretty interesting comments from Arteta. And he also spoke about Kieran Tierney. You always forget about Tierney, and Arsenal invested a lot of money. They chased him all the last summer, invested a lot of money to get him at the end of the window. And then obviously he's had two dreadful injuries. He arrived with the injury, but then he came back, started getting up to speed, and then he had that dislocated shoulder that needed an operation. We haven't seen him since. But he's back training, he's fit. And Arteta's been talking about Tierney. And again, really interesting comments, I think. And he says, I'm really looking forward to working with him and giving him an opportunity to play. His attitude, his commitment, his will, it's incredible. I think he's going to bring something special to us. It's a shame his injury, but it's part of his development. In your career, you go through these moments, and I challenge Kieran to say, Kieran, how are you going to react to that? You can't feel sorry for yourself. Okay, the level of expectation now is a bit higher, but you have to deal with it. You're playing with a top club, top expectation. Deal with it. You have everything to be successful here. You have the best possible attitude that I know from a player. Go and lead your profession and enjoy it. Really interesting comments, I think, from Arteta. what he says there about Tierney's attitude, now impressive he's been. He says he's the best possible attitude I know from a player. You talk to anyone, everyone says this about Tierney. From the moment he's walked in, he's blown people away by the way he wants to train, his work ethic, his desire to improve. And he's clearly impressed Arteta, and these are traits that Arteta loves about players. And yeah, really interested in the fact he said he thinks he's going to bring something special to us. Now, Kolasinac is obviously there at the moment. Saka's been playing at left back, but certainly from these comments you get the impression that Arteta is looking at Tierney as his number one choice left back. Arsenal are interested in Kurzawa at PSG, left back, and no, I've already had my piece on that. I don't think it's a transfer Arsenal should be looking at, but I know it's a free transfer, but still. But you certainly get the impression that I think Kolasinac is someone that they'll be viewing as very sellable this window if they can get some money in for him. Because they've got Tierney, they've got Saka who can fill in, and if they do end up bringing in Kurzawa, they've got another left back there as an option. But Tierney, I think that left side of Tierney, and then the youthful exuberance almost of Saka ahead of him and Martinelli as well. We've seen the link up between Tierney and Martinelli when they have played this season. I think that left-hand side going forward for Arsenal can be a real threat in the years to come. They've got some really talented young players there, and Tierney, I hate that phrase, like a new signing. But it could well be because he is still basically a fairly new signing because he's only in his first season. But the fact he's played so little football, if he can stay fit, and that's obviously a big if because he had injury problems before he arrived at Arsenal, he could be a really big player because he was impressive when we saw him. His delivery from out wide was fantastic. Like I said, his link up with Martinelli was really exciting. Arsenal got a real player on their hands there that it's easy to forget about given how his first season's gone. But he's clearly made a big impression on Arteta, and I think that's something to be excited about going into next season, whenever that may be. All right, I think that's about it. That's a few little points covered there. I hope you've enjoyed the video. As always, please do drop me a comment below if you want me to talk about something in my next video. Please do hit me up with a comment, and I'll read through them and see what you've had to say. But until then, everyone, please do stay safe. Enjoy the weather out there as best as you can because it's pretty nice at the moment, even though you can't do too much. And I'll speak to you all soon. Take it easy.